Hello and welcome to this current video, which this time is about the peaks, the 44, 45 and 46 class. Now last time I mentioned the 40s were not common around Birmingham where I grew up. Of course that's not the case for the peaks, which were very regular visitors to Birmingham and the West Midlands. My little story this week though relates to a peak journey well before I even really got into train spotting, and certainly before I started working on the railway. In fact, it goes back as far as when the Locusts were still numbered with the D series. And it's a trip with my grandmother to Scarborough from Birmingham on a day trip with D55 as the loco at the front. All very exciting for someone who was probably about 8 years of age at the time. And we got as far as Belper in Derbyshire, where the train ground to a halt. And back in those days, doors were flown open and people were wandering about on the track, almost like a rail tour. And the reason this particular train got stopped was unfortunately because it hit a herd of cows. And I was brave enough to jump down with all the adults and have a look, and got myself covered in bits of cow. And my grandmother was most unimpressed when I climbed back in the train and settled into the compartment once the train was on the way to take bits of cow with me to Scarborough for the day. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that little anecdote. Do you enjoy the video? Please like and subscribe and comment and let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.
Across the rolling hills of Britain, through valleys carved by industry and time, a new sound once echoed, a deep mechanical growl that marked the beginning of a new age. These were not the whistles and chuffs of steam, but the roar of a new generation, diesel power. They were called the Peaks, the British Rail Class 44, 45 and 46 locomotives. Their story is one of ambition, innovation, service and survival. This is the tale of three classes of locomotives that shaped British railways during the great transition from steam to diesel. This is the story of the Peaks. The late 1950s. Britain's railways stood on the edge of monumental change. Steam locomotives, once the pride of the network, were increasingly viewed as relics of the past. The 1955 modernization plan promised a bold new era, an era powered by electricity and diesel, designed to cut costs, improve efficiency, and bring British railways into the modern world. Among the first steps was the trial and introduction of mainline diesel locomotives. British Rail wanted a powerful, versatile machine, something that could haul passenger expresses at speed, but also heavy freight through the rugged landscapes of the Midlands and beyond. The solution would come from Derby Works, where engineers collaborated with Sulzer, a Swiss manufacturer of diesel engines, to create a new prototype locomotive, the Class 44. Between 1959 and 1960, 10 locomotives were built, each named after a famous British mountain. Their names would give the entire family of locomotives their lasting nickname, the Peaks. These prototypes were fitted with a Sulzer 12 LDA-28 engine, producing 2,300 horsepower and arranged in a cocoa wheel configuration. 6 powered axles designed to spread weight evenly and provide the necessary grip on steep gradients. With a tractive effort of over 75,000 pounds, they were among the most powerful diesels yet seen on British rails. But power was only part of the story. The Class 44s represented a crucial learning step. They revealed both the potential and the challenges of Britain's rush to modernize. Crews found them noisy, with cramped cabs and rough riding qualities. Maintenance staff discovered teething troubles with their engines and electrical systems. Yet they performed well enough to prove the concept. The future would not be steam, it would be diesel. Though just 10 in number, the Class 44s set the stage for what came next. A much larger fleet, based on the same design but improved in many ways, would soon follow, and with them the Peaks would truly make their mark. Encouraged by the success of the Class 44 prototypes, British Railways placed an order for a larger production run. Between 1960 and 1962, 127 locomotives were built. These would be designated Class 45, the true workhorses of the Peak family. Externally, they looked similar to the Class 44s, but there were important changes. They were fitted with an upgraded Sulzer 12 LDA 28C engine, rated at 2,500 horsepower, providing more strength and improved reliability. Their cabs were still Spartan, but the design was more refined, and crews began to notice the difference. It was the Midland Mainline where the Class 45s would earn their reputation. From London St Pancras to Sheffield, Nottingham and Derby, the Peaks became the dominant motive power, thundering through the Peak District from which they took their name. For travellers in the 1960s, a journey behind a Peak was something to remember. The powerful surge of the Sulzer engine, the growl echoing through the carriages, and the sheer presence of these locomotives made them icons of their time. The Class 45s were versatile machines. By day, they hauled expresses from St Pancras. By night, they could be found on heavy freight duties, moving steel, coal and oil across the network. They were not without flaws, but their reliability and sheer pulling power won them a lasting place in the hearts of railwaymen. But even as the Class 45s settled into their role, another development was underway, a further modification of the Peak design. This would become the Class 46.
If you're enjoying the video, please click the like button and subscribe if you've not already done so. Over 90% of people watching the video are not subscribers, and we'd really like to have you on board.
Between 1961 and 1963, a final batch of 56 locomotives was constructed, numbered D138 to D193. Outwardly, the Class 46s were almost identical to the Class 45s, but under the skin lay a crucial difference. They were fitted with brush electrical equipment instead of the Crompton-Parkinson gear used on earlier Peaks. This change was intended to improve reliability and standardization, as Brush already supplied components for other classes. Performance was broadly similar to the Class 45s, 2,500 horsepower, a top speed of 90 miles per hour, and the same Coco wheel arrangement. But drivers often remarked that the Class 46s felt subtly different, with their own quirks and handling characteristics. Unlike the Class 45s, which were concentrated on the Midland routes, the Class 46s often found work on the Western region, hauling trains from Bristol, Plymouth and beyond. They also handled cross-country passenger trains and long-distance freights, giving them a broad sphere of operation. You could see a 46 anywhere from Dundee to Penzance. The three classes together, 44, 45 and 46, came to represent a unified family, the Peaks. Together they numbered nearly 200 locomotives, and for more than 2 decades they were a familiar sight on Britain's railways. But this was only the beginning of their story. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the Peaks were at the height of their powers. They hauled express passenger services, regional stopping trains, and a wide range of freight traffic. Their deep Sulzer growl became a soundtrack to Britain's railways. On the Midland Mainline, they became the standard power for expresses linking London with the Midlands, Yorkshire and beyond. Trains such as the Thames Clyde Express and the Waverley were synonymous with Peaks. From St Pancras, they stormed north through Leicester, Derby and Sheffield, conquering the gradients of the Peak District with apparent ease. But it was not only passenger services. The Peaks were just as capable on freight. Long coal trains, vital for the nation's power stations, were entrusted to them. Heavy steel trains out of Sheffield and Scunthorpe were a common sight. And in the oil traffic boom of the 1970s, Peaks regularly hauled long tanker trains across the country. Railway crews developed a love-hate relationship with the Peaks. Drivers respected their power and performance, but the cabs were noisy, drafty and hot. Fitters knew them as complex machines that demanded constant attention. Yet when maintained properly, they could deliver dependable service day after day. For railway enthusiasts, the Peaks became firm favourites. Their distinctive sound, their rugged looks, and their sheer presence on the line made them unforgettable. By the late 1970s, they were woven into the very fabric of British Rail's operations. But time and technology march on. By the late 1970s, the Peaks faced new challenges. British Rail had introduced large numbers of Class 47 locomotives, which were more modern and versatile. And on the Midland Mainline, a revolution was coming. The high-speed train. The Intercity 125, with its sleek profile and 125 mile-per-hour capability, quickly displaced peaks from top passenger duties. Reliability issues also began to mount. The cooling systems of the peaks were prone to problems, and their cabs were outdated by modern standards. Maintenance costs climbed, and British Rail began to look for replacements. Withdrawals began in the early 1980s. The small fleet of Class 44s were the first to go, all withdrawn by 1980. The Class 46s followed soon after, the last withdrawn in 1984. The Class 45s, however, soldiered on. A handful remained in frontline service until the late 1980s. For many enthusiasts, the sight of peaks disappearing from the main line was heartbreaking. These locomotives had defined an era, and their departure marked the end of a chapter in British rail history. Yet the story of the peaks did not end with withdrawal. Thanks to the dedication of preservationists and enthusiasts, examples of all three classes have been saved. Class 44 number D4, Great Gable, was preserved and eventually became part of the national collection. Several Class 45s were saved by heritage railways, where they remain popular attractions today. And Class 46 number D182 has also been preserved, even operating on mainline rail tours in preservation. For those who grew up with the peaks, seeing and hearing them again is a nostalgic thrill. For younger generations, they are a tangible link to a time when dieselization was still new, and the railways were undergoing transformation. In preservation, the peaks continue to inspire awe, their Soldier roar echoing once more across the countryside. The British Rail Class 44, 45 and 46 locomotives, the peaks, were more than just machines. They were symbols of an era of change when steam gave way to diesel, an era of ambition when Britain sought to modernize its railways, and an era of character when locomotives had presence, power and personality. From the rugged mountains they were named after to the steel rails they thundered along, the peaks will forever stand tall in the history of Britain's railways. Though their time on the main line has passed, their legend endures. These were the peaks, and this was their story.
And now it's time to have a look at the On This Day in History feature, where we look at the Loco Shed record books from back in the day. This time it's 1982, and we're looking at the 13th of September, which is the day we upload this video. This page from the book covers the period from 1855 on Sunday the 12th of September until 7:55 on the morning of Tuesday the 14th of September. And there are plenty of peaks on show. The first thing we see, entering just after midnight on the 13th, two peaks consecutively at 5 past midnight, both coming off northbound sleepers, with 45144 coming off the famous 1S19 and 45143 off 1S23. They're separated by another loco, so I'm guessing they didn't come on as a pair. They must have followed each other around from New Street. All types of peaks on show, there's even a 46 in there somewhere. Hope you enjoy looking at that. Thanks very much for watching the video. Please like, share and subscribe, and have a look at the playlist to see what else we've produced. Thanks for now.